Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of The Suspense is Killing Me. I'm Lucas Marino, your host as always, and with me today is Madeleine Diste. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I had to do that just because we just discussed this. Um, in Australia, we pronounce this Diste, right?
Well, I pronounce it yes. Someone who's maybe a bit closer to being Italian might say it
Yeah,
properly.
I'm just yeah, we're having some fun right before we came on live. I had completely butchered your last name, and then I had to apologize profusely and start the whole thing back off again. But I'm so grateful you're here today, and we're going to talk and get to know more about you and your path to authorship and this amazing new story you have out, Radcliffe. And I've got so many questions. Okay, so you're in Melbourne, Australia.
That's right.
So we are 14 hours apart.
I am from the future.
You you are from Friday morning, right? And I'm in Thursday evening, so this is awesome. And when we went to set this whole thing up, I'm like, "Hey, what's your time zone?" Well, at first I didn't ask. I just sent you a link, and you're like, "Hey, dude, I don't think those times are gonna
A little bit
work."
early for me. I'm an early bird, but it's a little bit early.
A little bit early. So have you lived in Melbourne your whole life?
No, I haven't. I've been here a long time though, but started Canberra was where I was, grew up a little bit, and then Tasmania.
Awesome. What was Tasmania like?
Well, it's much cooler these days than it was when I lived there.
You mean
So it's
cooler as in like the temperature?
no, as
Okay.
in it's a bit more hipster. When I was living there, it was kind of backwatery, not
Gotcha.
as, but it was fun because you make your own fun when you're
Yeah.
living in a kind of small town, in the 90s.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so, small town Australia in the 90s. How long ago did you start writing? Did you start writing while you were there?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I wrote when I'm sure I probably wrote when I was in primary school.
Hmm.
Definitely wrote some terrible stuff in high school. Um, I remember there's some terrible poems in like a school magazine that I hope no one has copies of. Luckily,
Nice.
probably pre-internet, so no one will be able to find it.
Yeah.
That kind of gap in like the 90s pre-internet where you can't find stuff. Um, then then I did law at uni, and that wrecked my reading.
So you studied law.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Did you go all the way through the program?
I finished, but I never ended up practicing because it was not my thing really. But I
Right.
didn't know what else to do. But yeah, that really wrecked my reading because you
Yeah.
just you read so much and you learn to skim read
Mm.
that you just get to the point where it wrecks your fiction reading, and that was horrible because I was like a
Wow.
massive bookworm from a small child, so it was just like, oh, it's horrible. And then I tried to write. I got a bit caught up in my career,
Mm.
but then I was always wanting to, so I was always doing a course here and getting into it and loving it, and then
Mm.
falls away because life happens. And then one day I was like, man, you got to take this seriously. You really want to do this? Just take it seriously.
How long ago was that?
Um, Maybe 8 years ago is when I was like, come on, this is like life goal stuff. You
Wow.
want to do this, you got to do this. You got to.
Excellent. That's so cool. I mean, and that's such a big jump, right? Like, I mean,
Mm,
something obviously motivated you to reach that milestone and be
mm,
faced with that decision. What was life like around that time period? Was there, like, a lot of times I talk to authors and they're like, I was, fired from a job, or our company went bankrupt, or I retired from the military, and it was like now or never. It was like always some type of like major life event that kind of thrust them. Or I was interviewing Red Legault, and she's like, dude, I got bored. Like I was home taking care of the family, and I was like, I think I'm gonna start writing, you know?
yeah. It was, yeah, there was a kind of now, it felt like I wasn't midlife crisis, but maybe I was. It was that kind of moment of,
Hmm.
so I've been doing The Artist's Way. Do you know that with Julie? Julia Cameron. So I'm doing it at the moment, but it's kind of that talking about how, if you've got this creative urge and you're not doing anything with it, it makes you unhappy.
Mm.
And so, you get to a point where you're like, something's got to
Yeah.
change. And so, let's do something about that, because you just feel stuck if you're blocking your creative energy.
Wow. That's a big deal. I mean, I think we tend to like cover that up a bit in our professional lives, right? Because we haven't
Mm,
made that decision yet, so we start doing other things as an outlet for that, and we're not even recognizing that that's what it really is. And then one day you find it again, and you're like, I can breathe. You know, I was when I was in the service, I much like you, I was kind of I don't want to say tainted or whatever by all this just dry, straight reading. It was an immense amount of learning. I found it interesting, and I found that creative outlet was kind of like through leadership, like relationships with people at my command and coming up with creative solutions to engineering problems. And then I became an engineer. And again, just like your law experience, it's like, hey, why don't we just go read some engineering textbooks? Doesn't that sound fun?
awesome.
Yeah. I'm teaching like systems engineering and project management. I'm all excited. And people are like, dude, what is wrong with you? How can you be so happy about this? And I'm like this about everything. And then I realized I'm just channeling my creative
Yeah.
energy somewhere else, right? But there is no substitute for the real thing, is there?
No, and Julia Cameron talks about it being
Mm,
shadow careers. So
mm,
when you're too scared to make that leap,
mm.
and you have a career that's close, but it's not doing actually what you want. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Um, so did you feel this, like for me, I kind of felt this shift internally. Like everything that was normal and felt fine started to not feel fine, at work. I was
Mm.
like, I think I'm gonna
Mm.
retire. And people were like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think it's time for me to leave." And I was upset because everyone before me who had left the service, who had made that decision, and I was still 100% in, I would ask them, "Hey, dude, how did you know it was time?" And they'd give me that, "Oh, you just know when it's time." And I would get so angry hearing that because the logical brain engineer in me was like, "That's not justification, right? Like I need more. Give me
Mm.
some type of
Mm.
measurable." And there wasn't like there wasn't like a light that came on or a sign or like someone calling you and saying, "Hey, I think you should think about retiring." It was none of that. It was like
Mm.
the sign was inside. It just started to feel I wasn't in the right place, doing the
Mm.
right thing. So yeah, I love that you bring that up because that's the first time on the show we've talked about that as a motivator for changing careers to becoming a writer. Did you find it hard to get your voice back as a writer, having been away from it for a while?
Just want to say, firstly, I haven't been able to get away from the day job. So let's not, because
Okay.
one of the things that annoys me is these kind of perception that, this weird perception that writers like make millions of bucks. And it's like,
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, no. Yeah.
no, 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 no,
Yeah. Thank
no.
you for clarifying that. Yeah.
Day jobs. We have day jobs to pay our mortgages.
Yes, we do.
Um, uh, did it take me a while to find my voice? Yeah, I think it did. It
Mm,
took me a while to um, work out and trying different genres as
mm,
well. So trying to see what worked for me. So I tried writing crime because I do like a lot of crime,
mm.
but then I got very bored by police procedures and stuff like that. When I'd start writing it, and then I'd go, oh, I would have to know about all this, and I was like, oh, that's very boring. I don't want to know about that. I want to just make shit up.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to have to actually like do all this, hard research. What the hell, man? I'm supposed to be able to make this story up. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So um, I did a kind of dystopian thing that never went anywhere, but I wrote it. And NaNoWriMo. How could I forget? NaNoWriMo was such a big help for me. So yes, I completely forgot about it. So for many years I did NaNoWriMo, and realized that I could discipline and I could do it, but then not doing anything with the actual pieces that I've finished because I didn't know how to go back and edit and stuff like that. But that was awful to kind of
Get the
reminding me
juices
that I
flowing.
wanted to do it.
Can you explain a little bit about NaNoWriMo for those
Okay.
that aren't familiar?
National Novel Writing Month. So
Right.
it's November. It's write a 50,000 word novel in November.
Hmm.
So it's a big community around it. So you can, you have your nice little tally and there's people you can talk to, and it's usually local meetups. So, write-ins, all kinds of stuff. 1660 words per day it ends up being.
Oh, wow.
And I'm a bit of a vomit drafter. Well, I was then.
Mm,
So this really kind of got me into the let's just go. Don't
gotcha.
overthink it. Let's just smash through it, go with it. And where was I going with that? Yeah, so that's been really helpful. So I was writing this dystopian thing. It didn't go anywhere. I was trying to query it. I didn't really know what I was doing. I don't want to look back at it now. But on the side, I was writing something completely more fun, which was this steampunk thing that was set in Melbourne,
Hmm.
which ends up being the Antics of Evangeline, which I have out. And just decided to dip my toe in self-publishing. So I self-published 4 of those novellas. I think 2016, 2017, 2018. So that was just letting myself go wild because they're a bit silly. They're a bit
Hmm.
YA. They've got lots of things that I like I could do that because it's steampunk. It's kind of alternate history, so I can
Right.
going back to that research thing. I could go to a certain point and go, yeah, I'll research up to that, but that's too boring. I'll just make this bit up. Plus overlaying it with supernatural stuff that I've always
Right.
been interested in.
Right. That's very cool. So you're officially the first person that's mentioned steampunk on the show. So
Okay.
you're our steampunk crown wearer for now on.
Oh.
Yeah. And you're the second author that's mentioned NaNoWriMo. So I think it was Red Legault. So if it wasn't Red, don't kill me, people. And Red, I'll apologize to you in person if that's the case. But I think she was the last author that mentioned that here, and I was like, that must have been one of those things I missed while I was out at sea. Like I just didn't even know what it was
Ah,
when I first heard about it.
yeah.
But I find it fascinating. It's a great external, I guess you could say, like motivator, right? To
Mm,
kind of build a little structure and a little bit of a challenge and get people to work in community at the same time. It's really
mm,
cool.
mm.
So did you feel like on the backside of those writing sprints though that you felt like kind of like does all that kind of stopped, or did you stay with the community of writers that you'd kind of formed?
No, I think it's stopped. I think it's actually unsustainable.
Mm.
So, what community that I am associated with in Twitter, while Twitter still exists, um,
Yeah.
might not be there later on today, um,
Yeah.
is a monthly writing challenge group who it's very simple. It's like 500 words a day,
Mm.
which is much more sustainable than 1660 words a day. That's pretty hardcore, especially for 30 days in a row. So
Yeah.
this is like 500 words a day or an hour of editing a day.
Mm.
And it's very simple. It's just a group of people. There's a spreadsheet that you tally your words on or your editing time, and then they have a leader every month, and they send you a lovely message every day to go, "Yay,
Oh, that's cool.
you wrote today."
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lovely, yeah. So the Twitter monthly writing challenge, I've been a member of them for ages, and that really just helps because it's just nice to have those other people. Because yeah,
Right.
writing is pretty lonely,
Yeah. Yeah.
and um, a lot of self doubt, and a lot of times of why am I doing this, and
Yeah.
I spend all this effort doing stuff, and nothing ever comes of it. All that fun.
All the internal angst that comes with writing. I think that's why we are so motivated to start writing. Or not everyone, obviously, not speaking in absolutes, but so many people are inspired to start expressing themselves as in writing as teens because it's like we have to get out that angst, and then it's like we don't ever get rid of that. It's really still there. We just invert it a bit, and it becomes a more wild creature, except it's just a little less. It's a little more focused, right on us. Like,
Can you do memoir though? Like I have
yeah,
such respect for people who do memoir because I just like
yeah,
I can't open the
no,
cupboard and let that shit out for not real stuff. I can cover it over with a character, but I can't believe
yeah.
that scares me. You know, I can write horrific stuff, but talk about like exposing myself. I don't know how people do it.
Yeah, I talked to so I have to have a developmental editor that works very closely with me, no matter whether I'm writing fiction or nonfiction.
Mm,
I figured that out in my first nonfiction book. That well, one, I thought I really needed a coach because I didn't know what the hell I was doing yet. I mean, I knew, but I
mm,
hadn't experienced it.
mm.
So it was like I needed that motherly kind of accountability. Like, hey, dude, where's your freaking manuscript for the week? Like is
Oh,
like all the way down to that stuff. Because like you were saying, I was running in three different directions, running my
yeah.
fledgling business and still working a 9 to 5, and then writing on top of that. And so I felt like I was pulled in 500 different directions, and I was like, I have this one person that is going to hold me accountable, but also make me better, right?
Mm,
And then after that first one, I was like, oh, we've got a groove. We've like got
mm,
this pace. Went straight into writing the second one, and I suddenly became terrified that when I shifted to fiction, I wasn't going to have any of that support because none of these people were
mm,
anywhere close to the genre I write fiction in. And they were like,
yeah.
I don't want to read that scary crap, dude. Like, you can keep that to yourself. What's your book about? Oh, someone losing their daughter? Nope. Count me out. I was like, come on, man. So, anyways, I was fortunate to have Zach Bohannon as a book coach and a developmental editor on my fiction stuff. And I was like, oh my God, how does anyone do this without that kind of support?
Mm,
It's really difficult. It's a lot
mm,
harder than I thought it would be.
mm.
Yeah.
I've probably lent more on critique groups or
Mm.
beta readers, things like that, than getting a coach. I suppose it comes back to how you motivate yourself. So I'm lucky enough to be one of those internal motivator
Hmm.
people. Whereas I can see that some people really do need that kind of person
Yeah.
cracking the whip behind them. But yeah, critique groups have been really, really helpful and good
Yeah.
in terms of finding a right partner to critique your work and pick up the holes and
Yeah.
tell you themes that you didn't even know you were writing.
My first couple of weeks with Zach was pretty funny. You'll appreciate this. He was like, "Hey, chapter one was amazing. Chapter three was awesome. Chapter two, you need to throw away." And I was like, "What?" Like my heart broke. It was like the one I really felt the closest to. He's like, "Yeah, no, it's garbage, dude. You got to get rid of it. Completely useless." I was, oh,
Isn't that the truth? It's just
yeah.
like I just saw that one of my writing colleagues in Australia just reposted today something that I had written for his blog about how editing hurts, and how I forget it every single time. Receiving external edits hurts, and how I forget every single time. And then when I get it, my first reaction is, I suck. Why did I even bother? I'm so fucking embarrassed. And then a couple of days later, you're like, no, 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 it's cool. Like,
Yeah,
I
we're all
just need
right.
to do this, that, the other. It's all good. But that first day, every time I forget. Like,
I have this approach when I get my edit file back that I like go into my military mode. I'm like, okay, we have a target. We have no emotions. We have nothing to lose. We just have to hurry up and get through this. It's like jump in and I just go straight through the document. And there's parts when they're like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about here, right? Like, like a note in my and I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna ignore that right now and just keep moving. I go through all my copy edit stuff first so that I can clear the document
oh,
enough
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah. Do the easy bits first. Oh, yeah, I can uncapitalize that. No
yeah.
worries.
Oh yeah, get my
I'll take that
confidence
comma
back
out.
up.
Just
That's
leave
right.
the really hard ones to later. Completely
That's
rewrite this
exactly.
character. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I have to have that touch point throughout the writing process with my editor, because if not, we're going to end up in a situation where like I would have written that whole novella and chapter two would have sucked, and I would have found out at the end instead of when
Yeah.
I had written the first four chapters, you know. So do you share your work with that group while you're writing it, or do you wait till you're done with your draft?
Um, so I've had different critique groups along the
Mhm.
way. Um, I I'm not a perfectionist, but I do like it to be to a certain standard before I let anyone see
Right.
it. Um, so usually, because I'm pretty motivated, so I've got a blog going. So usually it's I'd rather give to someone in pieces, or
Yep.
usually, well, what I would ideally like is someone I could just throw the whole novel at, but you know, people have got
Sure.
things to do. So it's to me, I've got it to a point where I'm done as much as I can.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, I need you to help me out here. Because what I was going to mention is just before was getting back to actually what this podcast is supposed to be about in terms of suspense. One of the things that I find most helpful for someone to read it is, you know, when you're trying to hint things or red herrings or things like
Hmm.
that, or hint at the twist or not hint at the twist, and you have no idea if you're on the nose, if you're too blatant, if you're too subtle,
Hmm.
and you're just, you know, flying blind there. So that's when those readers really, that's one of the really key things that I find go, oh, and then, you know, the twist is, oh, yeah, and now I see how that fitted in, or, you know, I could see it coming.
Excellent. Yeah, I love those responses. So especially when you're giving them to them in fits and spurts, right? Because they can't even see if they try like what's coming down the pipe. And you're
Mm,
like, up to this point, have I achieved my goal of terrifying you for just a moment?
mm,
I have a in my novella, Bury the Child. There's a scene where the mother has this surreal kind of paranormal experience in the tub,
mm,
and I didn't share anything after that with my early readers just to see like what kind of cliff I would be hanging them off of. And the response I got was like, "Okay, hurry up! Here's the next chapter." Because they were so like, "Dude, if you don't give me the next chapter, I'm gonna lose my mind." Right? It's like you left me
yes.
dangling
We,
way up here, and I'm like, "Yes." I even had one of my readers say, "Dude, you made me cry." I was like, "Yes." Great.
oh.
I was like, "I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry."
Or is that the other one is like, what kind of fucked up shit are you got in
Yeah.
going on in your head, man?
Yeah, don't ever email me or call me again, dude. You're weird, right? Like, it's like never inviting that guy over again. Yeah, so we did have a bit of fun with that during that process. So so you've experimented with these different genres,
Mm,
but you've kind of you've kind of settled maybe, or you've gotten to a place where you're more comfortable with the genre you're writing in. Is that where is that an accurate depiction of where you're at now, you think?
I think
Maybe?
I've worked out that it's not because I also wrote like a, you know, so, well, I had a particular idea that was in my head for many years, and I wrote it, and that was also an idea looking for a genre. So it ended up being
Right.
historical fantasy because I
Mhm.
was not again, historical fiction is another strict historical fiction, too much research.
Right.
Can't be bothered. I'm not a historian. I
Me
love it
neither.
though. I love historical fiction. It is the
Yeah.
best, one of the best. But yeah, I can't be bothered. Um, but I think I've settled on. I think what my I don't. It, you know, genre's a marketing thing, really.
Yep.
So it's more dark mysteries. So
Mm.
that is kind of where I think I lie. So that might be horror. It might be crime. It might be, I don't know, just
Yeah.
something. Yeah, that's. I think that's really, yeah, where I'm thriller.
Well, I love that you have that because I think that that's a really it's a good sign of health as a writer that you're comfortable exploring different themes, different character types, different formats, and everything. It keeps things fresh, right? I mean, one of the things I
Mm,
was worried about when I started writing was I didn't really know what I was writing. And it
Mm.
took a few people saying, you know, this is gothic, right? Like, and I'm like,
Yeah,
is it
okay.
though? You know, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't believe you. And they're like, no, no, really. Here are the fundamentals. And there you are. And I was like, oh, you're right. Okay, well, I'm going to have to start telling people that. And then, of course, you tell casual readers, and they're like, what does that mean, right? It's like, is that horror? And I'm like, it's the haunted house stuff. Yeah, okay. But then in the next, project, I've got this modern thriller, which
Mm.
has nothing to do with Gothic, even modern kind of bend on Gothic, and has everything to do with like modern scientific thriller slash horror.
Mm.
So I think that it's nice to be able to be comfortable with that because I do feel like some people feel like they can get trapped in a genre,
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well,
So it's cool.
when it comes down to it, we're artists, aren't we? So we're
Yep.
wherever your heart takes you. Like I can see you've got your Stephen Kings down there
Oh yeah.
behind you, and he's so damn prolific. But he writes all over the place, doesn't he?
All over. Yep.
Yeah.
I kind of use that as a reminder, and I try to tell myself it's not because he's Stephen King. It's like, oh, he wrote this. Well, yeah, he can write whatever he wants, can he? I'm like, well, he didn't start that way. He's been
Yeah.
consistent.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the very first Stephen King novels I read was the first Gunslinger. The
Oh yeah.
Gunslinger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the hell did that come from? Like I was reading Misery and
Mm.
Pet Cemetery, and then my best friend's mom hands me the Gunslinger, and I'm like, what is this? It was totally off in left field. I was even commenting the other day with someone that I was reading Four Past Midnight,
Mm.
and I was just thrilled with how different each of the stories were from each other. I thought, how liberating as a writer and how
Yeah.
liberating as a reader to be able to have all
Mm-hmm.
these worlds available to me. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I won't dump on people that do write in particular genres because they do have a great talent for that. They enjoy it. Their readers love it and eat it up. Like, hey, knock yourself out. If you're happy, we're good, right?
Oh, exactly. If you're, yeah, you got to keep yourself amused as well and excited. So, hey, if you love your romance and you churn out your romance, because God, those romance readers, they're voracious.
They are.
Um, yeah, or you like to write your military sci-fi, go for it.
Yeah, it's definitely I think that a sign of maturity when you can determine maturity as an artist when you can determine that you're comfortable playing anywhere you're comfortable playing, right?
Mm.
And I think if you have a really sharp talent, Antonia Rachel Ward is really a good example of this. None of her stories to me are even remotely close to the in relation to the next.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love Sylvia Moreno Garcia.
Mm.
She writes all over the place. So, vampires, noir, Mexican Gothic. She
Love it.
wrote. She is just phenomenal. She's like one of my favorite kind of contemporary writers. Everything of hers is amazing.
I love it. So so you found yourself exploring all these different genres, but
Mm.
as you've mentioned, you had this kind of interest in law at one point, right?
Mm.
And I've actually worked really closely with an author who has basically shuttered a law firm to
Yeah,
become
yeah.
something completely different. And I I find that the interest that I had in engineering or the interest that I had in law growing up was very closely related to my interests outside of that. There were like traits. You've mentioned several times like crime and thrillers related
Mm.
to real crime. Was that all kind of tied together in your mind? Did you feel like that was kind of like a good place for application with that interest? Like, I'll go into law.
I think getting back to what we were talking about before, shadow careers.
Mm.
So I think it was um, I'm good at school. I'm good at words. I need to make a living.
There you go.
Get there and go. It's not actually about justice, the law. Hmm.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
It's about making sure that something was written.
See that word and the word next to it, you can mean that. It's about arguing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So quite different, but yeah, in terms of, oh, look, my day job is a project manager, so I am a reasonably detailed person myself, not to the
Yes.
extent of there is layers of detail. Um, but I think it's the crime, the thriller. It's the mystery. That's what really interests me. It always comes back to the mystery. So
Mhm.
something weird's going on. Something I want to know what happened or who did it or how it happened or yeah. So I think that's really where it comes down to it. It's
I love that. It's kind of like the unknown, right?
mm,
Well, as a project manager, and I teach project management at a university, so I'm a little bit of a PM nerd, but I tell all my students, like, hey, risk is the blanket that covers everything,
yeah.
everything in your project. If you can't manage risk, you just need to leave. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes, it is literally everything in project management is risk management. And how do you define risk? It's a certain measure of uncertainty.
Mm-mm.
And so I feel that it's very natural for you to succeed as a project manager if you can embrace the uncertainty. I love that that is in your art. I love that. I'm such a nerd. I'm sorry. I'm getting too excited about this. Right now, my watchers slash listeners are going, all right, dude, I'm out of here. You've had enough to drink tonight, Maria.
Although I started using that logic brain,
Hmm.
I started my writing very much plotter because of, I think, because of that brain.
Yep, here we go.
Um, here we go.
Yep, I love that. I love that.
Um, but then I think it became more of a signposter. Or there's some other kind of tent poles. There's some other metaphor that some people use. So you've kind of got, okay, I want to be here, and I want to be there, and I want to be there. I'm not quite sure I'm going to get there.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I started with as a like hardcore plotter. There's Stephen Pressfield has this 3-act structure
Hmm.
thing. Stephen Pressfield and the guy who writes the Story Grid, really useful books to help you with editing and structuring and stuff. So I used to follow that, where you have your 3-act structure, your exciting incident, your complication, your blah 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 blah. I would follow that and write it all out before I started, but I'd quite often find that 30,000 words in, I've got to know my characters, I've got to know them a bit better, and they're like, no, 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 we want to go over here. And so then I'd have to stop and reset and look at it again. Sometimes they still wanted to go to the same endpoint, but sometimes it's just like, oh, no, actually, it's not about this, it's about this. Um, but Radcliffe, my most recent release, pantsing, complete pantsing, which I've
Did
never done before. Yeah.
wait, did you pants the whole thing?
Oh, no, I had to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a measure, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
it wasn't like a lot of plotting involved.
I got to a certain point where, so I started with the nugget of the idea. So they're just kind of like what would happen if you got a message in your head that said death is coming? What would you do with that? And that was, I had that, held on to that for a while because it was like, oh, what am I going to do with this? That's cool.
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
can't write something just that with that. So I have to, what I got to wrap around that. And then so actually, when I was doing something before, I actually found the short story that it was which is called Death is Coming. And so I'd started with just like, okay, that, and then just build it out and build it out and build it out and go find these characters. Probably wrote the first chapter rather than my usual vomit drafting. Wrote the first chapter, edit, got to know it, built on it, and then got to a point where I was like, okay, now what's going to happen? let's plot this out. But really spent that time getting to know the characters and the setting and wanting it to be gothic and going, okay, well, I need to put the gothic things in. But
Right.
then, yeah, so
Well, I love
changing.
that. I love that because much like you, I was like, focused on like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna plot this thing out, and I had my I didn't, I didn't even end up anywhere near the pace I had plotted.
Yeah.
it was like once you get into the story, it kind of takes on its own life, right?
Mm.
And I feel like if you're a heavy plotter, uh, you're you're probably you're probably like I am with plotting. I have to plot, but
Mm.
it's only to give myself confidence to get started,
Mm.
right? Once I get rolling, I'm okay with deviating from my plotting. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
funny.
yeah. Okay.
And there's some people that are like, nope, I plotted it this way. This is the way it has to go. When I started the Bury the Child novella, I had plotted this whole thing out.
Mm.
And Zach, who I mentioned earlier, was like, yeah, dude, I don't think it's going to end up laid out like you've got it, but I do see it ending like you've got it. And
Mm.
so um, I just knew I had to drive toward that ending. And it got so much better when I just relaxed and just let
Mm.
each scene kind of guide me where it was going to go. And then, of course, you have greater immersion in time to think and have ideas about, and then the characters start talking to each other. And then you start, you get in their heads, and then you're like, but what if this happens? It's like, it gets so much better. So I
I had
love
that.
hearing you say that.
Yeah, I had that with a really specific example of the characters it's taking on. I wrote this vampire novella set in Australia,
Mm.
um, and these two characters, and I'm like writing away, and you're in the full on zone and the flow, and I'm like, wait a sec, I think they're gonna kiss. Oh, yep, okay,
Who am I to interrupt?
yeah, exactly. So now I've got to go back and kind of.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love hearing that. Oh, that's fun. And so like when you're okay, so when you're doing all this, when you're writing these stories and you're having this experience,
Mm.
what's your environment like? I mean, do you listen to music? Do you work in a dedicated space? Like, do you have to go somewhere? Like, I had a buddy who couldn't write in his house. He had to leave. He's like, I have to go like lock myself away somewhere away from everything. And I'm like, okay, that's expensive. What's it like for you? What's your writing environment like?
Um, I just need no one to talk to me. That's pretty much. I so I can do it in public spaces with headphones on or whatever, but I've got spots in my house. As long as no one comes and talks to me, I'm good. Or I can't hear people talking. Um, Music, yes, yes, yes. Love to have music playing. Instrumentals,
Ah,
ideally, or singing not in English, so I can't understand them, so it doesn't distract me.
oh, that's good.
Yeah, so uh, I try to write every day. I know people are like, you don't have to write every day, but hey, it works for me.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, no, always music. Doesn't really matter where it is, as long as I can't hear. Because I don't know, I've got this thing where as soon as maybe it's the writer's eavesdropping thing. I can't not listen into other people's conversations. So if someone's talking,
You're like, go ahead. Your fingers
and
start slowing.
I'm with my partner when we're at like dinner or something, and I'm always like, "Do you hear what they're talking about over there?" No. It's like, oh, I think they're breaking up.
Yeah. Oh, good, good. Like, hurry up. We gotta document what they're saying so I can put this in a story. That's fascinating. So when you listen to music, I'm similar. I've got this weird thing where I can just like block out words. Um,
Oh, yeah.
it's probably because I'm half deaf, to be
Mm,
honest with you.
mm,
I do know people that can't listen to music with words, right? Because it just
yeah.
starts to they dwell on lyrics, or the lyrics start to bleed into their thinking, so they can't
Mm.
have that. It's like a static, right? But what type of music do you prefer to listen to? I know you said instrumental, but are we talking like orchestrated? Or are we talking about like progressive metal? Like, what do we got here? What are we doing?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the. The beauty of these days is like streaming and stuff. You can just listen. I spend a lot of time on Bandcamp and just like picking up random things and just
Hmm.
following rabbit holes of genres and stuff. So sometimes it is full classical. Um, one book I was writing, I was listening to, the Silence of the Lambs soundtrack, which is actually shit.
The
But I had
soundtrack
it
or the
on
movie?
So the soundtrack, I had the CD and I had it on repeat. And my partner came in and was like, God, why are you listening to it? It's terrible. And I know it's just got it on repeat. So I just get into it. Sometimes it's like soundtracks, it's classical music, it's instrumental jazz.
Ah,
Yeah, sometimes post rock.
mhm.
So no lyrics post rock, just guitar-y, walls of sound, dark synths, so kind of horror-y,
Mm,
not 8-bit kind of games music. That's
right.
annoys me, but almost game soundtracks sometimes, the dark
Yeah.
synth kind of, yeah. So that stuff, there's so much of that on Bandcamp and things that you can find, and yeah. But it depends on my mood, because sometimes I'm like, I want something really mellow. Sometimes it's like fully ambient. Sometimes it's like rainstorms,
Right. Yeah.
just something to get you in the.
I tried to write a couple of weeks ago. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get out of my basement. This is my basement. I'm gonna get out of the basement. I'm gonna go upstairs with my laptop and I'm gonna sit in
Yeah.
my living room in front of windows. I'm gonna put some music on my TV. I'm just gonna go to YouTube and find something to listen to. And it was like one of those like just like 16 hours of continuous music kind of things. And it was like this looping horror soundtrack thing,
Mm,
and it's like animated, and I was so distracted. I was so distracted by the animation. I'm like, oh, this looks really cool. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I got to start writing. So I start writing, and then I'm like, okay, this is a little too intense because it's like a lot of like, it's like they're building jump scares into the music. And I was
yeah,
like, this started out great, but it's not going great. So I had to like scrap that and go back to listening to like Tori Amos.
yeah.
Yeah, or something.
I had a couple of weeks ago. I was listening to that similar kind of 7 hours of shamanic drumming and humming. That was cool
Right.
because that I found that really dropped me very quickly into zone, because it's just that and drumming and
Yeah.
stuff. Meditation music almost.
Very good. So this is like, so now I've got in my head this image of you, right? And you're sitting there and you got the tunes going and you're like in the zone. Could be the drums, whatever, man. Like we're just having a good time. You're like in there and you're writing Radcliffe, this
Mm,
story you had an idea about before that
mm,
morphed into something different.
mm.
How different was this writing experience for you? Like, did you feel different about this story than you usually do when you write? I mean, I always feel like sometimes I write something and I like it, but I'm not fully connected. And there's other times when I write something and I'm like, okay, I got a problem. I don't know how I'm going to put this down. It's like, what do I do? So when you got into Radcliffe, did you feel like you were more invested and more, um, I guess, more integrated with the story than you initially maybe assumed you would be?
I think what, and I don't know if I'm actually answering your question here, but I think what interested me and kept me going was I wanted to write something. Once I worked out that it was Gothic, it was like, ooh, I get to write something Gothic.
Mm,
And so that is the fun of it. Plus, I really enjoy psychological thrillers.
yes.
And I hadn't even thought that this was a psychological thriller, but my publisher has tagged it as. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is. So, and I think they're horror. So a lot of contemporary women's fiction is psychological thrillers, which
Mm,
is marketed as, I don't know, whatever. But it's horror. Come on.
sure. Yep.
It's okay. There's no monsters. Well, there's monsters, but they're real people. Um, and so that was the fun. I think that's what it's the testing myself and playing and just seeing what comes out and how to stitch it together. The challenge of stitching it together.
Love that. And your premise for Radcliffe is unique. Can you unpack that a little bit without like the spoilers?
In terms of, okay, so
Like what motivated you to write it, and then like how did that evolve into the story you have, right? So you could give us a little bit of a glimpse into Radcliffe.
okay, so I'll just talk you through the first kind of
Okay.
scene, that kind of the first chapter that really was that, as I said, there was that nugget of the expression,
Hmm.
death is coming. What would you do if you had that, heard that? And it's like, is it for me? Is it for someone else? What am I supposed to do with that? Um, and so how the book opens is it's a heat wave in Melbourne. So Melbourne can do a string of 40-degree days. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I don't know, 110 something, 115 or something like that.
Hot. Yeah, really hot.
Hot, horrible. Where and the temperature doesn't dip below the high 20s at night. So everyone, one of the key things about Gothic, heightened emotions. You think of Gothic generally quite often somewhere cold, there's moors and there's storms and stuff. But you want to talk about heightened emotions? You live through a week of a heat wave. Everyone is bratty, pissed off, underslept. Anyway, so it starts off this character is just being led by this death is coming, and she's being led through these streets of this suburb, and it's stinking hot, the sun's in her eyes, she's tripping over, she doesn't really know why she's even here, but she knows she needs to follow it. And then she stumbles across this kind of tumble down apartment building. So an old kind of Victorian era in Melbourne, we have these houses around in the kind of area which is a bit semi-industrial, so next door to it is wreckers and things like that. But it's just standing there, it's got weeds growing out of the gutters and all that kind of stuff. And she sees a sign, and the voice kind of leads her there. And there's a sign in the window that says, flat for rent, women only. And she's like, and the voice is leading her here. So she just knocks on the door and gets to the apartment. And then moves in to try and find out who Death's coming for.
Oh, so she has to kind of follow this calling to find the answer to the question. What a conflict internally for a character, right? Because like they could just choose not to listen. That's really cool. I like this. I like it. Yeah, I love that you've got that kind of external motivation for this character, but it's also super internal, right? It's coming from outside, but it's inside. Like it's all inside. That's really cool. Is there a theme that kind of resonated through the story? And did you plan that theme, or did it just kind of emerge as you were writing?
Yeah, I don't think I know the theme until I've at least drafted the whole thing. And then sometimes I can look back and see it, and sometimes I'm wrong. So I don't often set out with it.
Right.
I probably set out with kind of how I want the emotions to work. But as I said, this one was a pantser, so it was like, okay, well, this is okay. What do I do with this? And then start like looking through it, and you do need that little time to be more objective about it. So you've got to let it sit aside and marinate, so you forget about it for a bit, and then come back and look at it fresh again. So you can do that. But I think probably looking back at it now, and I don't know if that was it is your inner voice. So what is your inner voice like? Do you trust it? Do you not trust it? Yeah.
That's awesome. I find that the concept of internal dialogue for a character can really impact the portrayal of suspenseful fiction, because for writers that depend so heavily on external communications and dialogue for their stories, I was never one of those writers until I sat down and wrote my novella. I was terrified of writing dialogue, honestly, because I was
Really?
so focused on the internal,
Yeah.
and I'm big fan of psychological thrillers, and I wasn't like I'm gonna write a psychological thriller. I just was like I'm gonna write a story about a mom, and that's challenging enough as it is not being one. I've like, got a lot of exposure as a dad and as a son and all that, but I'm not a mom. So, how do I get there? And how do I do that? Oh, and then this mom has to talk to people. And as soon as I started writing the dialogue between her and her husband, I realized there's less of that than there is internal dialogue with this character, because she's
Yeah.
in such a tumultuous point in her
Yeah.
life that she really doesn't want to talk much, but she obviously has to. But the full on, like, internal struggle is just so good for suspenseful fiction, you know?
Especially if you're writing anything supernatural,
Right.
because um, no one understands. You can't explain it, a
Yeah.
supernatural experience, in words that anyone else can understand. And plus, there's also, you know, no one will believe you to start with. Or how do you even go, oh, yeah, this really weird thing happened to me? So, yeah, there is that. But I don't find dialogue that hard. How do you see your work when you're working? Because mine, if I'm in the zone, it's a movie, so I'm
Yeah.
just keeping up. So that's
Yeah.
the dialogue there too. Yeah,
The thing that happened for me, which I don't know, this shouldn't have taken me this long to realize this, but I don't mind picking on myself. It was funny. I had um, I had been writing for so long without scenes, like
yeah.
full on scene immersion. And as soon as I realized I can only write scenes. I am only allowed to write scenes. Today I have to write scenes. The minute I did that, I was like, okay, I'm in the scene. And it was such a simple switch.
Mm,
Remember, I told you I had to throw away chapter two.
yeah.
Chapter two of my novella was telling a story, but it was almost like from this godlike perspective, like this overseer
Oh,
of the story.
inside the scene, you
Yeah,
mean?
I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
in the story. I left the story to tell the story or to tell it to basically give a flashback.
yeah. Mm,
But my fatal error was I left my character to do it. And,
mm,
I just wasn't
mm,
even thinking. I was like, well, I've always written stories, but I've had never fully invested in character immersion in a scene like I did here, where they don't even leave this house, right? The
mm,
whole book is in this one place, and there's really three to four characters, and there's a high dependence on dialogue between them because of how confined they are. So, anyways, I found writing the dialogue is really easy,
mm.
but the problem I had was like not feeling stupid doing it because I didn't want to give too much of the internal dialogue to the external.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
See, this is what's so fun about writing. It's just like
yeah.
it's a craft. There's so
Yeah.
much to learn. There's so much to do better next time. So actually, I think another part of Radcliffe that I just reminded of is one of my critique partners was like, your characters aren't horrible enough. So and that becomes almost like a challenge. It's like, all right, gloves off, let's go.
You and I have an opposite problem.
Oh, yours are too horrible. Okay.
My characters were fine, but I wanted to kill everyone. And my guy's like, you can't kill the main character, dude. You can't do that. I'm like, okay, fine.
Oh,
Yeah,
Hitchcock can do it.
yeah, I can do whatever I want.
Yes,
That's
I
that's
can.
fun.
It's
Well,
my world. I can do whatever I fucking want.
when you hear that kind of feedback, do you think it's because you became so invested in the characters that you kind of sweeten them up a bit? Like, what was your kind of takeaway from that?
I think he was saying, you're too nice a person. Go harder.
Go harder. That works. You're like, dude, I studied law. I know how hard people can go. It's like,
Oh, I think it's just, yeah, yeah. I could just, yeah. Your good critique partner. He pushes you. He's like, come
right.
on,
That's good.
go.
Now, when you did that, how much did it alter the characters in Radcliffe? Was it across the board, or was it kind of isolated to a one or two characters?
Um, it was one or two,
Hmm.
but yeah, it was okay. No, that's a good challenge. Let's
Yeah.
make them worse because yeah, I'm not naturally that kind of person, so but it becomes a challenge to go. How far can you go?
Yeah. That's really cool. I love that you can kind of explore that uh, and make your story better while making someone else worse. You know,
And
kind
the
of.
thing is, you don't have to actually. You can have a play. Like there's no. So maybe it wasn't working. Maybe it didn't work.
Hmm.
And but the thing is, this is all fun and no one's actually going to die. like the character might die, but no one else is actually going to die. But you can, go off for 2 or 3 days, rewrite the scene. Doesn't work, no harm done.
Right.
Go back. Mm.
I love it. So obviously there's a lot of kind of like introspection involved in this, particularly with that kind of feedback from your critique partners, right? It's like, why did I write that character that way? Why did I construct that scene that way? Why did I want to
Mm.
kill? Like, why is this happening, right? Did you find that after you got through the writing process with Radcliffe, did you feel like you learned something new about yourself in that process, whether it be as a writer or just in general?
Whew, that's a deep question.
Yeah.
What about myself?
It could be about yourself as a writer or,
I think it might be getting back to that structural thing. It's just like I can play more. I don't necessarily need to have it all worked out.
hmm,
I can just because I think also around that time if I'm writing a long piece, sometimes you get a bit bored of it. You just go, oh, I'm sick of writing this. And so I have, in the last couple of years, deviated to flash fiction or short fiction or whatever, just to get, because these ideas, people say, where do you get your ideas from? I'm like, what do you mean? I made a cup of coffee and had three.
yeah,
So just to get rid of those. So I suppose it's because sometimes I was using that as the play, So a flash fiction which you can knock out in
right.
half hour, get the guts of it down. But that it doesn't have to be all fully nicely structured, especially when you listen to some other writers who I have full respect for. I think I heard Stephen King even say the other day he's a pantser.
Hmm.
Um, and people like another crime writer who's Australian is a guy called Michael Robotham. Similarly, he said he's a pantser. And I'm like, how do you write crime fiction if you don't know till like 3/4 of the way through who actually did it?
Yeah, that's tough. I don't know how they do that.
But that works for him. So, that there is, have fun. So there isn't one answer.
Right. I love that. Yeah, you're right about Stephen King. I about fell out of my chair when I was reading On Writing, and he had said he oftentimes doesn't know how his books end until he's there. And I'm like, what? No, Stephen, no. I've read so many of your stories, and I'm like, wait, you and I both didn't know where that was going until, this part of the book. That's fascinating. That feels kind of risky for me, but I've found myself in that position with the book I'm writing right now. I
Mm.
don't know how to end one of the four books. So I have a whole series mapped out and plotted and everything. And one of the books, the ending is a question mark, and it's not going to drive me nuts. I'm telling myself that, trying to build some
Oh,
confidence.
don't get me wrong. It's like I'm my current work in progress is another one which I kind of have pantsed, and it's a big mess.
It's all right.
It's like the character is decided because I also sometimes write out a sequence.
Yeah. Oh no.
So I just like go, I don't know what's happening here. I'm about to skip to another
There's
part.
nothing wrong with that.
Um,
You know.
and the character at the end has now decided that they're an unreliable neuron. And I'm like, oh, but at the start you were,
Pretty awesome.
how am I going to, how's this working? Shit.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, sometimes that's one of the better ways to find out what to put in the middle, right?
Well, yeah, but it's going to make some kind of logical sense.
Yeah. Well, I actually, writing a 4 book series, and I was like, maybe I should write book 2 before I write book 1. And my wife says, why would you do that? I said, because book 2 is going to be so good. I've got it all plotted out and I've got everything thought out. It's going to be so, it just came like so naturally to me. She's like, yeah, no, 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 no. I'm not letting you do this. You're just using this as an excuse to not start writing book 1. And I was like, you're so
uh,
right. She's like, pick your confidence up off the floor and get in there, dude. Like, okay, fine. Yeah. So Radcliffe, you published this in August. Was it
mm,
August 26th?
It came out. Yes, it did.
Okay. Um, how's it been? Like, are you on this whirlwind tour right now where you're just like, not like people are knocking your door down to
It's
yeah,
champagne.
it's great, right?
It's
Are you doing any like promotions right now, or are you guys because you
this.
yeah this right? Yeah. Dude, you're looking at it.
Hey, if anyone else wants me on their
Yeah,
podcast,
here we go.
here I am. Um, oh, it's so hard.
Mm,
You know, there's so much stuff going on. There's so much content around. It's really hard to
yeah.
find the right places. And like in Australia, there's a lovely little horror writers kind of
Mm,
scene, but bookshops, media,
yeah.
they don't really care.
Yeah.
So it's tough, but yeah, if anyone's listening who would like me to write for them or have me on their podcast, I'm more than happy to.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's not easy, people.
It's not. And most of the I mean, this is going to come to no surprise to anyone listening to this. The sometimes the absolute hardest part about the life cycle of the book is when it's done being written and we have to go out there and like spread the word. And for some people it becomes very natural. They
Mm,
can just like I'm I'm very experienced with marketing, having owned a business, but when it comes to like marketing fiction, it's a bit unique. Um,
mm,
and there's a lot of things I can do with nonfiction books that I cannot do with my fiction books for promotions.
yeah.
Like I've got this whole matrix thing I do with nonfiction. It just doesn't fit as cleanly with fiction. Um, but then I see people like Clay Chapman who can just is a walking billboard for his books, and I love it. It's natural. He's so much fun. I'm like, I wish that every author I had a chance to work with had a pinch of that fun and creative. He can be so creative. I'm like, all right, I can't run a TikTok channel because I can't. I'm not like that well minded with that stuff. So um,
I'm old.
yeah, it's like I don't. Yeah, I don't know what my excuse is. It might be that I'm 45. I don't know. But I just find that if we can lift each other, right? Other writers lifting each other,
Hmm.
um, other readers lifting other readers, writers lifting readers. I had a controversial little social media thing a couple weeks ago where, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you saw it, everyone else saw it. There was this guy who beat up a reviewer of one of his books, like verbally.
Like literally.
Yeah, verbally, right?
Oh,
Yeah. And then he went and wrote a book about her.
oh yeah.
What kind of dirt?
What is wrong with
Yeah, it's
people?
like a total dirtbag move, right? So, anyways, um, I was like, look, if you're a professional reviewer or someone that takes reading our art very seriously, I'd love to have you on the show. Like, you're a part
Mm.
of the community. Like, come on, let's talk. And the response I got was weird. Like, a lot of writers were
Oh,
like, dude, that's awesome. Some non-writers were like, wait a minute, like just reviewers? Like, yeah, they're kind of important. They're a bridge between readers looking for books and writers writing books. I'm like, how is this not a thing? And so, anyways, I guess all of that to say, there is a place between us that is filled with activity and the effort and passion of other people. And we're kind of spanning that, right? As a writer, you're kind of like one foot in that world at all times and one foot in your book. And I find it fascinating that we take on that love every time we hit print.
and we forget that what I find is that, and I know this is awful, but book reading is niche.
Yes.
Um, so if I talk to just people I know, the people who are, my level of bookworm is unusual.
Right.
So, you know, but going back to that, it's uh, word of mouth is always the best. Whether
Mhm.
that's me, my family, my mum telling me about this great book, or someone texting me saying, "I'm reading this. This is great." Goodreads, social media, etc. That's really, and you know, rather than me going rah rah rah, read my fucking book, which you know is I feel embarrassed to do because I'm Australian.
Well, you just did a good job of it. It was very natural. You're great.
I feel like yeah, it's not.
Do it louder this
Not that.
time. Yeah. Yeah, right.
And yeah, word of mouth is always the best, you know. So that's the one. And what I love is when authors share their 1-star reviews and are like, check this out.
Oh my gosh, Gabino Iglesias is like
Yeah.
super skilled at that. I love it. He'll turn them around and be like, you know, I think he had one that was, and I'm totally paraphrasing. This is not what they said, but it was along the lines of like, uh, I can't deal with this much horror, or I can't deal with this much gore. I was like, and he's like, stamp of approval. Like, thank you for the 1 star. I'm going to share this everywhere. This is fun.
I had one for one of my books, which is like, this annoyed me, that annoyed me, but I need to find out what happens, so I'm going to read the next one. Cool.
Oh, I saw a 1 star review. It's like the book was great, and then they just complained about something that was completely not related to the story. It was like, but I couldn't get my file to load properly on my phone or something. So they gave like Amazon a review in the author's, you know, in the book review. It was like,
Yeah.
come on, dude. That's
The book was late, 1 star.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time from the future all the way in Friday to talk to us a bit about your art, your life leading up to your writing career, the beauty of what you have in Radcliffe. I can see it and I can hear it in your voice how much you really are passionate about this story. And I'm encouraging everyone out there to go grab your copy. I was crawling all over it before we got on today. And I've got to ask you a question before I cut you loose. The cover, is
Mm,
it building sideways?
mm.
Is there a particular building?
No, it's not a particular building, but
I
yeah,
love
I
it.
love it.
Yeah, I was looking. I'm
Yeah.
like, what is that? Then I was like, oh, that's a building. And then it's like, oh, it's a side. I was like, that's cool. It took me a second to realize what it was. I was like, I have to make sure I ask her.
Yeah, because we were struggling with
Yep.
gothic, so you know the gothic key things, and heat wave.
Mm,
So it's like bleached out. But yeah.
very cool. Oh, there it is. Oh, and the gloss, the glossy paperback.
Oh, this is my proof copy. So
How is the published version a matte or a gloss finish paperback?
I think it is a gloss.
It's very,
It is a
very.
gloss.
That's like one of those moments when you're like loading your files. You're like, ooh, am I going gloss or matte?
So. This one, so I'm hybrid. So this one's with Dead Set Press. So I did not
Oh, good. Okay.
have anything to do with, apart from going, ooh, love the cover. You know, yeah, it's Dead Set Press, which are awesome to work with.
Excellent. Yeah, if you want to share a little bit about your relationship with them, I'd love to hear it. So are they in Australia?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they're
Hmm.
local. I was really lucky to, so last year, the year before, they had a call out for short stories for weird, I think the anthology is called Where the Weird Things Are. So they wanted them from different places in Australia. So they wanted one from each state, lots of different. Anyway, I had a story which was kind of called Rivulet, which was set in Hobart, which is where I grew up. As we talked about before. Oh, did we talk about that? Or was that off? Did we talk about
We talked
Tasmania? Or was,
Tasmania.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Um, and it was a kind of it not quite something that happened to me, but it's similar, and it's about kind of the land and almost like land spirits and stuff like that, and spooky stuff going on walking through the streets at night. Anyway, so I was so lucky that they accepted my story into their anthology. Then a year or so later, they had an open call for novellas, and so I went, "Remember me?" And yeah, then they took it on. So that's been fantastic. So yeah, the small press really dedicated to Australian, New Zealand voices. Yeah, so
Very cool. Well, we'll make sure that we get their link in the show notes so that people can check them out. Um, I'm sure you've kind of had an opportunity to meet some of the other authors that are on them. Are you have any you want to recommend, or are you reading any of the fellow authors on your publication?
Uh, well, the where the wild things, where the no, whoops, where the weird things are anthology.
Yeah.
There is a couple of absolutely phenomenal stories in there as well. Dead Set Press at the moment has also got a call out for neurodivergent authors
Oh,
in Australia and New Zealand. So that'll be really interesting when that comes out
yeah,
as well to see, because I just find that so fascinating as to get really insights into people
mm,
that traditionally we haven't seen
yeah,
before, unfortunately.
absolutely. So what are you what are you gonna leave us with for book recommendations? Are you reading anything right now that's like, dude, you got to read this?
Well, I actually have a little podcast of my own, which is, and this is going to sound a bit weird, it's on a French internet jazz radio station.
Really?
Um, so, yeah, it's called, the radio station is called Art District Radio, and I do a 5 minute book review every week. They've just had summer holidays, but I'm back. I was back last week, so I just did a little 5 minute review, and it is also called Dark Mysteries. So thank you to Didier from there, who actually kind of helped me go, oh, actually, I think that's what I write. When he was saying to me, maybe you want to call your show this. So the most recent book that I've read that was phenomenal is Starve Acre by Andrew Michael Hurley, which is folk horror, which is one of my all-time favourite genres.
Excellent.
So grief, spooky landscapes, odd
Nice.
children,
All the good stuff.
legends, myths. Yeah.
Well, you and I were speaking before we went live about my interview with Stephanie Ellis, and she was like my first folk horror like interview, and I was fascinated. And she's sending me messages afterward, like, "Hey, check out this band, and this look at this great book." And I was just like, "Oh, this is so cool!" Like to live in that part of the world too, where there's such a prominent environment for it. It's just so cool. So excellent. All right. Well, I've seen that book and I haven't read it yet.
Mm.
So now I'm even more motivated to pick it up. It's the second time today I've had my TBR adjusted. It's like
Just the second? Come on.
just the second. Yeah. There's probably three more before I even get out of bed this morning. I'm just
Yeah,
blocking them out of my
exactly.
memory.
It's like forgotten, and then oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Well, we appreciate that referral, and I am just so grateful that you were able to make the time to meet with us from all the way on the other side of the world. And I know this wasn't the most, I guess you could say, conventional interview, um, and I'm grateful that you were willing to share so much about all the things. I feel like one of the strengths of having these sessions with fellow authors is we get to peel the curtain back for the people who really want to get to know us better as readers. And you've been so kind to do that for us today. There's something for everybody in everything you've said, and I just really enjoyed today's session. So thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us.
Oh, thank you. Now I feel a bit embarrassed.
No, stop. You don't have to be embarrassed. You can just tell everyone where they can get more of you. Where can everyone connect with you?
Uh, so you can find me madelinediest.com. So lots of E's. Just Google me. I'm the only one. I'm on Twitter till it explodes. They're probably the main places you can find me. I'm on Goodreads as well. Radcliffe, yeah, so a nod to Anne Radcliffe. So if you're wondering how you spell it, Radcliffe. But thank you so much, Lucas. This has been really fun, actually.
I'm glad to hear it because I always worry that it's not going to be one day and someone's going to be like, don't ever
This was
invite me
shit.
back on your show, dude. Yeah.
Never call me again.
Yeah. Lose my email address, dude. Well, I again grateful that you took the time to meet with us, and I can't wait to get you back on the show the next time you release another amazing Pantser book. So
Yeah, when I've fixed the mess that is the other thing. Might be
excellent.
about 5 years.
5 years. No, we'll hold you to that. You're going to be back within the next 12 months. We're going to call your publisher and demand more. How about that?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you so much, Miss Madeline. We will see you on the next episode.
Oh, thank you, Lucas.